The war began long before the human ever found the artifact. Across the desert plains of a ruined colony, silence had replaced the sound of cities. What had once been a trading hub between alien empires was now a graveyard of stone and sand. Burned metal lay half-buried in dunes, and every step crunched on glass from buildings melted by orbital fire. The human moved carefully through it, keeping his eyes open for both danger and supplies. His name was not shouted in history, nor was he a great soldier. He was only a wanderer, one of the last survivors of a destroyed outpost. He had no intention of being a hero. He had come looking for food and shelter, not relics. But war always left strange things behind. Pieces of alien technology, some broken, some still alive with power, were scattered through the ruins. Most people were too afraid to touch them. He, however, was too desperate not to. Hunger drove men to madness, and he had walked 3 days. With nothing but dust on his tongue. As the sun fell behind jagged ruins, he noticed a glow beneath the sand. At first, he thought it was fire. Then he realized the light was too steady, too cold. It was blue, like a pulse beating underground. He knelt and brushed the grains away with his hands, until a black stone shape appeared, covered in symbols he did not know. The light traced along the carvings, alive as if the stone were breathing. He stared at it for a long time. His mind told him to leave it buried, but his body refused to move. Something about it held him in place. He remembered the stories whispered by soldiers and scavengers. They spoke of artifacts older than any empire, things left behind by races that had vanished before history began. Things that were not meant to be touched. The desert wind pushed harder, filling the air with dust. He laughed to himself, the dry sound of a man too tired to care. "Wake up," he said to the stone. His words were a joke, meant only for the empty air. A human mocking his own hunger and loneliness. The moment he said it, the ground trembled. The carvings blazed brighter, shooting blue light across his face and hands. He stumbled back, but he could not look away. The stone was no longer just stone, it was opening. The cracks widened, and a voice that was not a voice filled his head. It was not sound, not words in the air, but something deeper, something that touched the marrow of his bones. "You carry the blood," it said. "Your line is not broken, your bloodline is owed." He froze, his breath caught in his throat. His mind screamed at him to run, but his legs stayed locked. The voice continued, slow and heavy, like an ocean pressing against his skull. "Long have we waited, long have we slept. The dead is not forgotten, your bloodline must answer." The desert seemed to lean closer, even the air grew heavier. His skin prickled with the glow, and the blue light painted him as if marking him for something unseen. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "I don't know what you mean. I don't owe you anything." The light flared, and his shadow stretched across the sand. Symbols twisted around the stone, reshaping themselves into patterns that shifted like water. The presence inside his mind pressed harder, searching through his memories, peeling them apart. He felt it seeing his childhood, his scars, his laughter, his loneliness. It was not only looking at him. It was searching for his ancestors through him, clawing into the thread of blood that tied him back through centuries. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. The desert was gone. The ruins were gone. For a moment, he saw only darkness filled with stars, and beneath those stars were shapes so vast he could not understand them. Pillars of light, taller than mountains. Wings that reached across galaxies. Voices that spoke in silence. His heart thundered against his ribs, each beat echoing against something endless. Then, as suddenly as it began, the vision ended. He was back on the sand, gasping, shaking. The artifact pulsed softly, waiting. He reached out a trembling hand but stopped an inch from its surface. He realized with a sick chill that the voice had not gone silent. It was still there, waiting at the edge of his mind, patient and hungry. You spoke, it whispered. And so you are bound. Bloodline will answer, you cannot turn away. The human sat in the dirt, the desert night rising around him, and knew that something older than the war had just reached out and touched him. He had woken it with a joke, and now it demanded more than he could understand. The air tasted of dust and lightning, and though he wanted to run, his feet refused. Deep down he felt the truth. His life was no longer his own. The desert night grew darker as the glow of the artifact dimmed. The human sat in silence, his hands trembling against the sand. He wanted to believe it was just his mind playing tricks on him, some dream born of hunger and exhaustion. But the echo in his head would not leave. The voice was calm now, but present, like a second heartbeat hidden behind his own. He rose slowly, wiping dust from his clothes. The ruins around him looked the same as before, broken and lifeless, yet he felt watched. Not by soldiers or raiders, but by something that had no body. The artifact was still glowing faintly, pulsing like the breathing of a sleeping beast. He circled it once, careful not to touch, then stepped back. Why me? He whispered to the night. The wind carried no answer, but the voice in his skull stirred again. Blood remembers. You are not the first. Your line was chosen long ago. The words were heavy, ancient, pressing against his thoughts like the weight of oceans. He shook, his head hard, trying to clear it. He was just a wanderer, no different from thousands of other broken lives left behind by the war. What bloodline could matter to something buried in the sand for centuries? But the voice did not fade. It pushed images into his mind, faces he had never seen. Warriors standing before alien courts, carrying blades of light. Ships flying under banners he did not know, fighting battles against creatures of shadow. He saw a man who looked like him, though older, speaking to a circle of beings with eyes like suns. Then the vision shattered, leaving him on his knees. Again, gasping as though air had been stolen from his chest. Chosen, the voice whispered. Forgotten by you, not by us. He wanted to scream at it, to demand silence, but fear dried his throat. He staggered to his feet and turned away. He needed to leave. Whatever this was, it was not his burden. He walked fast, his boots crunching over sand and broken stone, pushing himself into the dark desert. Behind him, the artifact's glow shrank into the distance, but even as he moved farther away, the bond remained. The voice traveled with him, faint but clear, whispering in time with his steps. Blood must answer. Hours passed. The desert was endless, lit only by stars and the pale glow of two moons hanging over the horizon. He kept walking, though every step felt heavier. When dawn finally bled across the sky, painting the sand red and gold, he collapsed near a jagged ridge. His body was empty of strength, but his mind was restless. He thought of leaving the planet entirely. If the artifact had bound him, perhaps distance would break it. Somewhere in orbit, ships still lingered, traders and scavengers risking the ruins for profit. If he could reach the port, maybe he could find passage off-world. But the voice interrupted. Cold and certain. You cannot escape. Your blood is not only here, it flows wherever you go. He clenched his fists, pressing them against his temples. I don't want this. I never asked for this. The desert gave no answer except the faint hiss of shifting sand. Still, deep inside, he knew the truth. He had spoken the words, he had awakened it. Whatever had been sleeping had now opened its eyes, and he was the key it recognized. As the sun climbed higher, he pushed himself up and stumbled toward the ridge. His eyes caught movement in the distance, a shape against the horizon. At first, he thought it was a mirage, but as the heat waves cleared, he realized it was a machine. A scavenger crawler, old but working, its engines rattling as it crossed the dunes. Hope sparked in his chest. If he could reach them, maybe they would take him. He waved his arms, shouting until his voice cracked. The crawler slowed, sand spraying behind its treads. Two figures appeared on top, armed with rifles. Their helmets gleamed in the sun as they aimed down at him. "Stay where you are." One of them shouted through a speaker. He raised his hands, desperate to show he was no threat. "I'm just a traveler. Please, I need help." The figures muttered to each other, then one climbed down. As they approached, their eyes caught something strange. His hands, still glowing faintly blue. The marks from the artifact had not faded. The scavenger froze, weapon tightening. "What did you touch?" they demanded. He looked at his palms, shocked. The glow pulsed faintly beneath his skin, like veins lit from within. He had no answer, only fear. The scavenger stepped back quickly, shouting to the others, "He's marked, he's carrying it." The other rifles turned on him at once. The crawler's engine roared louder, ready to retreat. The human realized with horror that whatever the artifact had done, it had branded him. Others could see it. "Now, wait," he begged, raising his glowing hands. "I don't know what this is." The scavenger aimed again, but before they could fire, the voice in his head surged forward, sharp as thunder. Bloodline must be protected. The glow in his hands flared brighter, spilling into the sand around him. The scavengers froze, their weapons shaking. The crawler's lights flickered, as if power itself bent around him. He stared down at his own hands, terrified, as the artifact's bond revealed its strength for the first time. The light in his hands did not fade. It spread through his skin like liquid fire, glowing veins crawling up his arms. The scavengers stared at him in fear, their rifles trembling. One of them muttered a curse and backed away, while another shouted, "He's bound. He carries the mark." The crawler's engine sputtered as the strange energy made the air tremble. Sparks danced across the metal plates, and the scavengers shouted in panic. They had seen many dangerous things in the ruins, but never a human. Glowing with alien light. "Stay back." The leader barked, but even he did not dare step closer. The human raised his hands higher, his voice shaking. "I don't want this. I don't know what it means." But the artifact's presence spoke again inside him. Its voice was calm, steady, and unshakable. "They fear because they remember. Your blood has walked here before. You cannot run from what you are." He clenched his teeth, trying to push the voice away. But it was not something he could silence. It pulsed with each beat of his heart. The scavengers began retreating to the crawler, muttering about curses and death. One of them made the sign of warding, an old gesture against spirits. "Don't follow us," the leader warned. "If you come near, we'll burn you where you stand." Then the crawler roared back to life and turned away, treads grinding deep into the sand. In moments, it was gone, leaving only dust and silence. The human sank to his knees, staring at his glowing hands. He pressed them against the sand, trying to smother the light, but it shone through anyway. The desert wind howled around him, and he felt more alone than ever. Not only was he trapped with the artifact's voice, but now he carried its brand. Anyone who saw him would know that by the time the sun reached its highest point, he had made a decision. If he could not run, then he needed answers. The artifact had spoken of his bloodline. That meant others before him had been bound. Somewhere in history, there had to be records of it. Stories, maybe even warnings. And in the ruins of the old cities, he might still find traces of those who came before. He set out again, moving toward the distant black skeletons of towers. Each step was heavy, but the voice seemed to guide him. Sometimes it whispered words he did not understand. Sometimes it showed flashes of alien landscapes, temples beneath strange stars, and beings kneeling before symbols that matched the ones glowing on his skin. When he reached the broken city, silence wrapped around him like a shroud. Streets lay cracked and empty, glass and ash scattered across the stone. He walked past collapsed buildings until he found what looked like an old library or hall. Its walls were scorched, but parts of its structure still stood. Inside, he found shelves of carved tablets, cracked but not destroyed. Symbols covered them, the same style as those on the artifact. He reached out, tracing the carvings with glowing fingers. The symbols lit faintly under his touch, and for a moment he felt as though the walls themselves remembered him. Then the voice surged, louder than before. "Here, they left their words here. Read what was promised." The human frowned. "I can't read this. I don't know your language." But the voice pushed harder, and as his hand stayed on the tablet, the shapes began to shift. His eyes blurred, and suddenly the symbols reshaped into words he could understand. His breath caught in his throat as he realized the artifact was forcing the knowledge into him. The text spoke of a covenant. Long ago, a human bloodline had been bound to guard an ancient power, chosen because they were different from the other races. The blood was a key, passed down through generations. If ever the artifact slept, it would only wake again when one of the lines spoke to it. His chest tightened as he read further. The covenant was not only about guarding. It was about sacrifice. Each chosen one would eventually be tested, and the bloodline itself could be demanded in payment. He pulled his hand back, shaking. The words on the tablet returned to symbols he could not read. The glow in his veins dimmed slightly, but not enough to vanish. The human sat down hard on the cracked stone floor. His thoughts raced, but no path offered escape. He was marked. He was chosen. And somewhere ahead, the test waited. The silence of the library did not last. A sound drifted from outside, boots striking stone, voices low but sharp. He crept to the broken wall and peered through. A squad of soldiers moved through the street. Their armor bore the insignia of one of the alien empires. Their weapons gleamed, and their eyes scanned every shadow. They were not scavengers. They were hunters. At their lead was a tall figure whose eyes glowed faintly like embers. They carried a staff crowned with a shard of crystal, humming with energy. The soldiers followed close behind, disciplined and watchful. The leader stopped, suddenly turning their head toward the library. Their eyes narrowed. "It is here," they said in a voice that carried across the silence. "The mark has awakened. The bloodline lives." The soldiers fanned out, weapons ready. The human backed away from the wall, heart pounding. He knew then that the artifact's voice had been right about one thing. He could not turn away anymore. The world already knew he was bound. And now, they were coming for him. The human pressed his back against the cracked wall of the ruined library, his chest heaving as the soldiers closed in. Dust shifted with every step they took, their armor gleaming under the pale light that filtered through broken windows. He knew he had nowhere to run. The city was a graveyard of stone, and they were hunters, trained and ready. The leader's voice echoed again. "Do not resist. The covenant is older than you. Your blood is not yours to command." The words chilled him. They knew. Somehow they already understood what the artifact had done. He clenched his glowing hands into fists, trying to will the light to fade, but it pulsed stronger, betraying his location. The first soldier spotted him. There. The squad moved quickly, rifles raised, their movements sharp and certain. The human stumbled back deeper into the ruins. His eyes caught fragments of broken stone, shelves collapsed into rubble, but nothing to defend himself with. He had no weapon. Only the mark. The soldiers surrounded the entrance, their boots thudding against the ground as they stepped inside. The leader entered last, their staff glowing faintly with energy. Their eyes locked onto him, steady and merciless. "You should not have spoken," they said. "It was not meant for you to wake it." The human's throat tightened. He wanted to shout back that he had only joked, that he never meant for any of this. But the words died inside him. The soldiers raised their rifles, and the leader lifted their staff. The artifact's voice roared inside his skull, thunder in his veins. "Do not bow. Bloodline is not prey. Bloodline commands. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He raised his hands, and the light flared brighter than ever. Blue fire rippled outward, washing over the soldiers. Their rifles sparked and died, metal hissing as if struck by lightning. The air cracked, dust exploding from the floor as though invisible weight had crushed it. The soldiers staggered, shouting, shielding their eyes. The leader, however, stood firm. Their staff glowed brighter, resisting the energy, but their face tightened with effort. The human stared at his hands in shock. He had not attacked. He had only raised them in fear, yet the power had answered. The artifact's voice pressed harder, cold and commanding. They would take you. They would chain you. But you are bound to us, not to them. Stand. The leader stepped forward, forcing their way through the energy storm. You do not understand what you hold, they said, their voice straining. That power is not a gift. It is a curse. It consumes those who carry it. The words stabbed into him like knives. He did not want to believe them, yet part of him wondered if they were true. His glowing veins burned like fire under his skin. His breath came in ragged gasps. The artifact's voice spoke again, harsh and sharp. Lies. They fear you because you are chosen. Do not trust them. The leader thrust their staff forward, sending a wave of force crashing into the human. He flew backward into the stone wall, pain exploding across his back. The soldiers advanced again, their weapons sparking back to life as the energy around him weakened. Panic rose in his chest. He pushed against the ground, hands shaking, and shouted without thinking, "Stop!" The ruins answered. The floor beneath the soldiers cracked, blue light pouring through the stone as if the ground itself obeyed him. A shockwave threw them across the hall, their armor clattering against walls. The leaders slammed their staff down to keep from falling. Their eyes wide with sudden recognition. It has truly awakened, they muttered. The bloodline has returned. The human lay on the ground, gasping, his body trembling from the force he had unleashed. His hands smoked faintly, the glow dimming but not gone. He looked at the soldiers sprawled around the room, stunned but alive. The leader straightened, lifting their staff again, but they did not strike. Instead, they studied him with sharp, searching eyes. Listen to me, human. You think this power is yours, but it is not. The artifact binds you, and soon it will consume everything you are. If you stay on this path, you will not survive. The human shook his head weakly. I never asked for this. I don't even know what it wants from me. The leader's gaze softened for the first time. It wants your blood. And if you do not learn to control it, it will take more than yours. It will demand all who share your line. The soldiers groaned as they tried to rise again, their armor scorched, their weapons damaged. The leader lifted a hand, signaling them to stay back. Then they turned their eyes to him once more. You cannot run anymore. You must choose. Either surrender to us, and we will seal it again. Or walk the path alone and risk everything. The human's heart pounded. The artifact's voice whispered in his mind, fierce and certain. Do not surrender. They cannot seal what was never theirs. Your blood is the key. You are the key. He sat there in the dust, caught between the voice in his blood and the warning of the leader. The desert outside was endless, and the ruins offered no answers. But one truth had already taken root in him. His life was no longer his own. The human sat in the ruins, his body trembling and his breath unsteady. Dust swirled in the air, catching faint traces of the blue glow still leaking from his hands. The soldiers had regained their footing, but kept their distance, watching with unease. Their leader, staff still glowing, did not look away from him. You are dangerous, the leader said quietly. Not because of your will, but because the artifact has chosen you. That power does not care for you. It only cares for the bloodline. You are its vessel. The human swallowed hard, his throat dry. I never wanted this. I didn't choose it. The leader's eyes narrowed. No one ever does. The words cut deep. He thought of his childhood, the simple life he had wanted, the ordinary days that had been erased by war. He had fought only to survive, never to carry burdens larger than himself. Now he was being told that his blood carried weight he had never imagined, weight that stretched back through generations. The artifact's voice whispered again, curling through his thoughts. Do not listen. They would take your freedom. They would chain what belongs to you. You are more than a vessel. You are the key. The human pressed his palms to the cracked floor, his head spinning. Two voices, one from within, one from without, pulled him in opposite directions. One promised power and destiny, the other warned of doom and chains. He felt trapped between them, yet he knew he had to move. I can't go with you, he said finally, his voice shaking but firm. I can't trust you. The leader's expression hardened. Then you have sealed your fate. They raised the staff and the soldiers lifted their rifles again. Energy hummed through the air, sharp and threatening. The human's heart raced. He had no weapon but the power inside him, and it frightened him more than their guns. Still, the artifact's voice thundered, filling his veins with fire. Stand, do not bow. Bloodline commands. His body obeyed. He rose to his feet, his eyes burning with the same blue light as his hands. The ground shivered beneath him, cracks forming where he stepped. The soldiers faltered, their aim shaking. The leader's staff blazed brighter, but sweat beaded their brow. The human did not strike. He only stood, but the weight of the energy around him made the ruins tremble. The broken shelves rattled, stone fragments sliding across the floor. The air grew heavy, pressing against the soldiers' armor like an invisible storm. The leader lowered their staff slightly, not in surrender, but in realization. You are farther along than I thought, they muttered. The bond is deep already. One of the soldiers shouted, we should kill him now before it takes him completely. The leader did not answer at once. Their gaze stayed locked on the human, studying him with something colder than hatred. Finally they spoke. No, killing him would only release it. Better to watch to see where this path leads. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. Slowly, they began to retreat toward the broken street, weapons still raised in case he moved. The leader lingered a moment longer, their eyes narrowing. You are a danger to yourself and to everyone you meet, they said. The galaxy will not forgive you for waking what was buried. And when the time comes, you will beg for the burden to end. Then they turned, following their squad out of the ruins. Within minutes, the sound of their boots and engines faded into the desert air. Human sank back to the floor, his hands glowing faintly in the shadow of the broken hall. His chest rose and fell heavily. He was alive, but the words of the leader echoed in his mind. A danger. A vessel. A curse. The artifact's voice, however, was steady. They fear you because they know your blood is stronger than their chains. You are chosen. You are not curse, but covenant. He closed his eyes, pressing his hands to his face. I don't want this, he whispered. I only wanted to survive. But even as he spoke, the glow in his skin pulsed again, stronger this time, as though the artifact was answering not his words, but his soul. He saw visions once more, fleets of ships bowing to a single mark, alien rulers kneeling in fear, stars bending around a voice that sounded like his own. When the vision faded, he was left trembling, half in awe, half in terror. The ruins were silent, but deep down he felt the truth pressing against him like the desert heat. The galaxy would not leave him alone now. He had awakened something that would pull him into its storm, whether he wished it or not. He rose again, stumbling toward the broken streets. His journey was no longer about survival. It was about understanding what he had become. Somewhere out there, the truth waited. Somewhere the full weight of the covenant would be revealed. And though fear burned in his chest, another feeling stirred beneath it, something sharp, dangerous, and alive. The desert stretched for miles, endless and merciless. The human walked with slow, heavy steps, the sun burning above him. His body ached, his throat was dry, yet the glow in his veins did not fade. It pulsed softly, guiding him like a hidden compass. Wherever he went, he felt pulled in one direction. As if the artifacts were stretched across the land, days passed in silence. He found water from cracked pipes buried under the ruins, and ate scraps scavenged from abandoned stores. At night, the visions came again. He saw fragments of his ancestors, men and women, who bore the same light in their blood. Some stood in palaces, others fought in great wars, all bound to the same covenant. Their voices whispered, not in words. He understood, but in echoes of duty and sacrifice. The more he saw, the more he feared. The covenant was not about power, it was about burden. Every face he glimpsed carried the same weight in their eyes, the same exhaustion. And yet, they had stood before empires and then obeyed. That part filled him with awe he could not deny. On the fourth night, the voice of the artifact grew sharper. The seal weakens. What sleeps must rise. Bloodline must prepare. He pressed his palms against his head, shaking. Prepare for what? What is coming? No answer came. Only silence, heavy and suffocating. The next morning, he reached another. Ruins smaller than the last city, but older. Half-buried temples lay scattered among dunes, their entrances carved with symbols like those on his skin. The glow in his veins burned hotter as he approached. He felt his heartbeat quicken, as though the ground itself recognized him. Inside the largest temple, the air was cool, filled with the smell of dust and stone. Columns lined the hall, cracked and eroded, but still tall enough to dwarf him. At the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested another relic, smaller than the first. It was a sphere of black crystal, etched with the same flowing symbols. The moment he entered, the artifact's voice stirred again. Take it. His steps slowed. Fear gripped him. The last time he touched one, his life had been bound. What would this one do? But something in him already knew there was no choice. He moved forward and placed his glowing hands on the sphere. The temple exploded with light. The columns shook, sand pouring from the cracks, and his mind was thrown into darkness filled with stars. He saw a gate massive, ancient, floating between galaxies. Its frame was carved with the same symbols, but it was sealed, locked by forces older than empires. The voice thundered through the vision. Your blood is the key. The gate will open. What lies beyond will return. He gasped, his chest heaving. What lies beyond? The vision shifted. He saw shadows behind the gate, shapes too vast to comprehend, their forms twisting with light and darkness. Their presence made his bones ache and his soul tremble. They were not like any species he had seen. They were older, heavier, like the weight of eternity itself. When the vision ended, he collapsed to his knees, shaking violently. The sphere dimmed, returning to silence, but the mark on his body blazed brighter than ever. He staggered to his feet, clutching his chest. Now he understood why the soldiers had called it a curse. His blood was not only bound to a relic, it was tied to something locked away, something that should never wake. Yet the artifact's voice spoke again, calm and certain. They fear what they cannot control. But you are chosen to lead. What returns? The human stumbled backward, horror in his eyes. No, I won't. I didn't ask for this. I don't want this. But the glow in his veins refused to fade. It burned with each heartbeat, reminding him that the bond was already too deep. Outside, as he left the temple, he saw figures waiting at the edge of the dunes. Not scavengers this time, pilgrims. Their clothes were simple, their faces covered in cloth, but their eyes glowed faintly with recognition when they saw him. One of them dropped to their knees, bowing low. The bloodline lives, they whispered. The covenant breathes again. The others followed, kneeling in the sand, their voices rising in unison. The bloodline lives. The human froze, staring at them in shock. These strangers, people he had never seen, were bowing to him as if he were a king. His hands trembled as he lifted them, trying to tell them to stop, but the glow only grew brighter. Their eyes widened in awe, and their chanting grew louder. The desert wind roared around them, carrying their voices far into the ruins. For the first time, the human realized the truth. The artifact had not only bound him, it had marked him for the galaxy to see. To some, he was a curse. To others, he was hope. And whether he wanted it or not, both would come searching for him now. The pilgrims knelt in the sand, their voices rising like a prayer. The human stood frozen, the glow in his veins burning brighter as their chant echoed against the ruins. He wanted to tell them to stop, to see him not as something sacred, but as a man lost in the desert. Yet when he lifted his hands, the light only grew stronger, and their faith deepened. One of them, older than the rest, rose slowly. His face was lined, his eyes sunken, but when he looked at the human, they gleamed with reverence. "We have waited generations," the man said softly. "The covenant spoke of your return. The bloodline cannot be erased." The human shook his head. "I don't understand any of this. I'm no leader. I'm no chosen one. He stopped, his throat tight. "I just spoke as a joke." The old pilgrim bowed again. "Even a whisper awakens what sleeps. You are proof that the covenant endures." The group guided him toward a cave at the edge of the dunes. Inside, torches flickered along the walls, their smoke staining the ceiling black. Carvings filled the stone, deep and sharp, telling stories of battles and oaths. The human traced the symbols with his glowing fingers, and they shimmered faintly under his touch. "These are your ancestors," one of the younger pilgrims explained. "Your line guarded the seal for countless ages. When the empires rose, they tried to break it. When they failed, they tried to erase your name. But the blood remembers. Always, the blood remembers." The human studied the carvings. Warriors with glowing marks stood against armies, their light cutting through darkness. Others were shown kneeling before a massive gate, their hands raised in sacrifice. His chest tightened. Every figure looked burdened, yet unyielding. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why my line?" The old pilgrim answered with a voice like gravel. "Because humans are different. Your kind was born on a world no empire dares to claim, a place that breaks even the strongest. The first covenant was made because your blood could endure what others could not. And when the seal was made, your line was bound to it. Not for glory, but for survival of all." The human staggered back from the wall. Survival of all. The words pressed against his mind like chains. He thought again of the visions of the gate, of the shadows twisting behind it. If it opened, would they bring salvation or destruction? The artifact's voice stirred again, colder now. "They will call it doom. We call it return. The bloodline is not chain. The bloodline is throne." He pressed his palms to his head. "Stop," he whispered. "Just stop." But silence never lasted. That night, as the pilgrim slept in the cave, he sat awake near the fire, staring at the flames. His thoughts twisted with doubt. The soldiers had called it a curse. The artifact called it destiny. The pilgrims called it salvation. And he called it unbearable. The old pilgrim sat beside him quietly. For a while, neither spoke. Then the elder said, "I see fear in your eyes. That is good. Those without fear are the ones who destroy." The human clenched his fists. "I didn't choose this. I don't want it." "No one who bears it ever does," the elder said. "But you must decide how to carry it. Power does not care what you want. It only asks what you will do with it." The words echoed in his chest long after the elder left him alone. The next day, the pilgrims led him deeper into the caves. At the farthest chamber, he found a chamber carved into the rock, its walls covered in glowing etchings that matched the marks on his skin. In the center lay a stone altar, and upon it rested bones. Human bones, old and brittle, wrapped in faded cloth. The pilgrims knelt. "One of your line," the younger whispered. "The last before you." The human approached slowly, his steps uneven. The bones radiated a faint blue glow, the same as his veins. He touched the cloth with trembling hands, and the voice of the artifact thundered once more. The last bearer fell. "You are the next. The covenant does not break." He recoiled, his breath quickening. The visions came again. He saw his ancestors. Final moments standing before the sealed gate, bleeding into the sand, his light fading as he collapsed. And behind the gate, the shadows stirred, waiting. When the vision ended, he staggered back, shaking violently. The pilgrims lowered their heads, whispering prayers. But to him, it felt less like honor and more like a trap laid centuries ago. That night, as the campfire flickered, the sky erupted with distant light. Streaks of fire burned across the horizon, ships, dozens of them, descending from orbit. The pilgrims cried out in alarm, gathering their few belongings. The elder's face was grim. The empires have learned. They know the bloodline breathes again. They will not allow it to spread. The human's chest tightened as he stared at the falling lights. He knew then that the soldiers had been only the beginning. Now entire empires were coming. Not for him, but for what his blood carried. The artifact's voice whispered with dark triumph, "Let them come. Bloodline does not kneel." And for the first time, the human wondered if the voice inside him was not only bound to the artifact, but also bound to something waiting behind the gate. The horizon burned with light as the ships descended, their engines tearing the sky open with fire. The pilgrims huddled in fear, their chants broken into cries. Dust rose in the desert as the first landing craft struck the ground. Armored columns marched out, their banners shining with the marks of alien empires. This time there were not a dozen soldiers, but hundreds. The human stood on the ridge outside the cave, watching them come. His veins glowed brighter with every heartbeat, the mark spreading across his skin like living fire. His body shook, not from fear alone, but from the weight of the artifact's voice filling his soul. "They come to chain you. They come to erase the covenant. Bloodline must not bow. Bloodline commands." His hands clenched, glowing like molten stone. Yet deep inside, his own voice whispered back, "I never wanted this." The elder pilgrim stood beside him, leaning on a staff. His wrinkled face was calm despite the storm below. "If you run, they will hunt you forever. If you fight, you may die. But if you do nothing, the covenant will consume. You, decide, child. Decide what your bloodline means." The human's eyes closed. He thought of his ancestors, of their burden, of their sacrifice. He thought of the soldier leader who warned him it would kill him. He thought of the visions of the gate and of the shadows waiting behind it. Then he thought of the pilgrims, kneeling in faith, their lives depending on him, and of the soldiers calling for his death. His breath steadied. When he opened his eyes, the glow spread fully through his body, turning him into a figure of living light. He stepped forward down the ridge as the armies raised their weapons. The first barrage of fire tore across the sand. Bolts of energy screamed toward him, but before they could strike, the desert itself erupted with blue shockwaves. The blasts bent around him, dissolving into light. The soldiers staggered, their lines breaking. The human's voice thundered across the field, deeper than his own, carrying the weight of all who bore the covenant before him. "I did not choose this, but I will carry it. Not as your weapon, not as your curse, as my bloodline's truth." The artifact roared in his veins, its power unleashed. Waves of blue light surged outward, knocking entire squads to their knees. Ships overhead faltered, their engines flickering, pulled down by invisible chains of energy. The Empire's banners burned as their soldiers broke ranks in terror. Yet as he raised his hands higher, the vision of the gate returned, clearer than ever. He saw the seal trembling, cracks spreading across its ancient surface. The shadows behind. It pressed harder, eager to break through. The artifact's voice cried out in triumph. Yes, open. The gate must open. But the human gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face. He felt the power begging to be unleashed, the covenant demanding the bloodline fulfill its role. Yet in his chest, another truth burned brighter his. Will, no, he whispered, his voice raw. Not like this. The glow around him flared with violent force, shaking the desert. The artifact screamed in his mind, furious, desperate. You cannot deny us. Bloodline exists for the gate. He drove his glowing hands into the sand. The earth cracked, light spilling in every direction. Instead of releasing the gate, he forced the power back down, sealing it deeper, burying the artifact's command beneath his own choice. The ground trembled like thunder as the light carved into the ruins, locking the covenant once more. The soldiers staggered, shielding themselves from the quake. The pilgrims cried out, clinging to the rocks. When the storm ended, silence fell. The glow faded slowly from his veins, leaving faint traces like scars under his skin. The artifact's voice, once thunder, was now nothing but a whisper, weak and fading. You defy, it hissed. Then it was gone. The human collapsed too. His knees, his chest heaving. For the first time since that day in the desert, his mind was his own. The air felt lighter, though exhaustion weighed him down. The soldiers, scattered and broken, began to retreat, fear outweighing command. The leader with the ember eyes was among them, watching him from afar. Their staff glowed faintly, but they did not raise it. Instead, they bowed their head once, a gesture of grim respect, before disappearing with their army into the dunes. The pilgrims rushed to him, their voices filled with awe. You sealed it again. You bore the covenant and turned it back. The elder placed a hand on his shoulder, his eyes shining. You have done what no one before you dared. You made the covenant your own. The human stared at his glowing scars, his heart heavy but steady. He had not freed himself completely, nor had he destroyed the bond, but he had chosen. Not the gate, not the artifact. Himself. As the sun rose over the desert, he rose with it, his figure framed against the light. The galaxy would still come for him, some with fear, some with faith. But he no longer walked as a man trapped by a joke. He walked as the first of his line to decide what the bloodline truly meant. And though the burden would never leave him, he carried it not as a curse, but as his own truth.